Greetings one and all, I'm Red Angel, and today I'll be analyzing the 2016 game, Oxenfree. The subject, the Duality of Grief in Clarissa and Alex. A big thanks to Admiral Teddy for buying me this game on Steam. Spoiler warning, I'll be spoiling the entirety of Oxenfree in this video. You have been warned. Oxenfree is a game that talks not just about ghosts, but about loss and coping with that loss, which is where we find our group of teenagers. Alex lost her brother Michael in a drowning accident. By proxy, Clarissa, the most antagonistic of the teenagers, lost the man that she loved. Both of them are shown to be grieving in different ways, yet end up lashing out at each other. For Clarissa, it's because part of her blames Alex for the death of Michael. For Alex, it's because she still resents Clarissa for spending all that time with her big brother, almost taking him away from her when he was planning on moving somewhere else with Clarissa. It's as though both of them have a difficult time accepting Michael's death as what it was. An accident. In Roberta Trites' novel, Disturbing the Universe, Power and Repression in Adolescent Literature, she states the following. In children's literature, learning about death symbolizes a degree of separation from one's parents. Adult literature confronts death in a variety of intricate perspectives that it seems difficult to trace a pattern on the topic. But in adolescent literature, death is often depicted in terms of maturation when the protagonist accepts the permanence of mortality, when she or he accepts herself as a being towards death. This is also applicable to Oxenfree because we experience Alex growing up throughout the story, slowly realizing that there are things she can't change even if she tries to. It's shown by the Alexes from the other games coming into your save files and trying to tell you what you should and shouldn't say. Even though Oxenfree runs on multiple diverging points, there are still some inevitabilities that happen no matter how many times you play, one of which involves Clarissa. No matter what you do, Clarissa gets possessed by the ghost and remains their puppet for the remainder of the game, forcing Alex to confront Clarissa in more ways than one. I called Clarissa antagonistic for a reason earlier, because not only is she antagonistic when she isn't possessed, but when she is possessed, she acts very similarly, to the point where it's hard to tell what part of it is Clarissa and what part of it is the ghost. Throughout the game, various members of the group become possessed, and you know it's not them because from what little you've learned about them, they wouldn't say things like that. With Clarissa, on the other hand, it's harder to tell because she already has a grudge against you and her tone is condescending to say the least. However, Alex's friends aren't the only ones that are possessed by ghosts. Alex herself, when she goes into these fugues of past memories, is possessed as well. So out of all the characters, both of them are the ones that are under control of the angry submarine ghost the longest. Which makes me wonder just why they picked the both of them. For Alex, it's a little more obvious since she was the one that opened up the rift to the other world in the first place. Clarissa, however, well, she was separated from the others, but other than that, why did they latch onto her so easily? Why did they choose to use her rather than Ren? If anything, he was the most susceptible to them at the time due to the fact he was high as a kite on those brownies. So why Clarissa? It's because of her connection with Alex. The two girls, no matter how you may look at it, have a connection, a single binding thread that binds them together, and that's Alex's brother Michael. They are bound together in a duality of grief, and there's nothing they can do but continue the dance they're doing until it reaches its most logical conclusion, either resolution or destruction of one of the offending parties. We can see that Alex is depressed from her dialogue, and Clarissa is angry, also possibly depressed, but it's harder to tell since she seems pretty frustrated most of the time. Both of them are in stages of grief after all this time, and once Clarissa is possessed, it becomes clear that there's going to be quite a bit more things aired out about Alex's relationship with her brother and Clarissa as time goes on. Luckily, the player has the ability to make these memories mostly good ones by their choices in the game itself, but still, there's more of a melancholic negative tint to them than there would have been otherwise. Grief does that to people. Though it may be best to call the stages of grief states of grief, especially according to an editorial found in the British Journal of Psychiatry by Holly G. Prigerson and Paul K. Maciejewski, called Grief and Acceptance as Opposite Sides of the Same Coin, setting a research agenda to study peaceful acceptance of loss. It states this. Yearning was found to be the predominant distressing sentiment throughout the acute bereavement period, i.e. 1 to 23 months of post-loss observation period. Less frequently, experienced reactions such as disbelief, anger, and sadness declined on the average over time from loss. When each grief indicator was rescaled to enable a comparison of peaks, all peaked within 6 months post-loss and in the exact sequence proposed by Balabi and Parks and illustrated by Jacobs. All of these grief indicators were highly correlated with one another, which is understandable given that 3 of the 4 grief stage indicators were extracted from an internally consistent grief inventory. These findings suggest that disbelief, yearning, anger, and sadness may represent aspects of a single underlying psychological construct: grief. This is a more apt description of what Clarissa and Alex are doing because while they do understand that Michael is dead, neither of them seem to have fully accepted it yet. Or at least the reason why he's dead, other than blaming one another. This anger they have against each other managed to set the more dramatic parts of the story in motion, since Alex, who may or may not want to save Clarissa, depending on how you play her, still hasn't fully forgiven Clarissa, or herself for that matter, for the death of Michael. The ghosts themselves seem to not only represent the deceased men and women from the submarine, but all of the underlying chaotic emotions that are buried within Clarissa and Alex's psyche. For those of you who are familiar with the paranormal, you may know about the concept of how certain places that are haunted awaken when certain kinds of people enter, because it reignites the energy of the place. Clarissa is filled with all the angers the ghost could possibly need, and Alex has a lot more anger below the surface. There's also depression, self-loathing, and all of these raw emotions that the ghosts tell Alex they're feeling or have felt throughout the game. While they're deliberately antagonizing to Alex, they're also playful, trying to get her to play games with them for the lives of those she loves. This initially made me wonder if they were just corrupted and made sadistic by their own time lost in this strange triangle-like void, or if they sensed a kindred spirit in her, knowing that she felt what they felt and they were ultimately using that against her. Their grief in its rawest, most visceral form, unyielding and unbridled. Anything that was ever screamed at in anguish, any tears shed, any solemn silences held, that's what they are, or at least that's what they've become after all these years of not moving on. They use those who are in the most pain as their puppets for their own gain, so they may eventually pass into our world, by taking some other bereaved souls with them, Alex and her friends being the near-perfect targets for them. But what about Jonas, you may ask? Jonas also gets possessed a fair amount, mourns his mother's death, and is bound to Alex as a kindred spirit and a stepbrother. Why didn't they use him as a puppet more often than they did? That's because they weren't connected by the same sort of event, and because Alex giving up Jonas is quite a bit different than Alex giving up Clarissa. The ghosts used Clarissa because they knew that Alex in her grief would be more than willing to give up the body, mind, and soul of someone she had grown to dislike than someone that she had grown attached to and didn't mind. It was the perfect plan, and even if they didn't get all the kids, they still got one body for one spirit to live out the remainder of their days. Keep in mind though, a lot of this negativity is from Alex's point of view. Don't get me wrong, Clarissa is quite a negative Nancy about things, but she's also quick-witted, smart, and funny. During the flashbacks we see from her, we see that she's quite caring as well, which strongly contrasts the way that she was portrayed at the very beginning of the story. It sets Alex up to be more of an unreliable narrator, since all of the conversations we've had with Clarissa prior to the one we see in the memory now need to be looked at through this frame. Clarissa was actually a snarky yet fun-loving person who was more than willing to let Alex come along during times that should have been days between her and Michael. She was willing to indulge the love that Michael had for his little sister and was willing to talk to Alex to try to get to know her better. When you then look back at the conversations with Alex at the very beginning of the story, you notice that there are little moments where she tries to insist to Alex that she doesn't hate her, and that she's actually a good friend judging by what her friend Nona tells Alex about her birthday party memory from all those years ago. With her naturally confrontational and impish nature, however, she still gets into clashes with nearly every character in the story, not knowing how deeply she's negatively affected our heroine to the point where there's an option to actually turn against Clarissa and kill her. But there's also a lot more to it. We do find that Alex herself has changed since the death of her brother, and this has been noted by the characters themselves. The American School Counselor Association published an article about how teenagers cope with sibling death, some implications for school counselors, written by David Balk, in which he states, while admitting that sibling death does not necessarily lead to pathological consequences, few persons would be so bold to dismiss the threat to well-being posed by sibling death. In one study that supported the findings of Kane et al., previously well-adjusted children typically manifested altered behavior patterns that indicated considerable difficulty in coping after a sibling had died. Alex still wasn't coping well with the fact that Michael had died, which is seen from her stilted conversation about it with Jonas, her discomfort when Clarissa brings it up, and her reactions when confronted with the visions of her friends stating that it was her fault that he died. Reading further into the study, it's noted that some of the relationship with peers improved, some of them became worse, and some of them were unchanged. 21 said that their relationship with peers changed after the death, 10 worse relationships, and 4 mixed relationships. Better relationships were attributed primarily with sharing with someone else during a time of need. Many peers, however, were portrayed as uncertain and uncomfortable around the participants. Over time, relationships that had gone bad improved, and those that had deepened endured, which speaks volumes of both Alex and Clarissa's relationship because they did have a falling out after Michael's death, consisting of not speaking to one another and lashing out at one another. However, you have the option to improve their relationship if you choose not to sacrifice Clarissa near the end of the game, as well as if you're overall friendly with her in the memories flashbacks and trying to help her when she's under that possession. According to the epilogues, doing so improved their relationship dramatically. This is part of the duality of their grief. Both of them feel a strong sense of loss that is ultimately starting to come to a head to the point where it's going to explode in one way or another. It's what the ghosts were anticipating, what they felt when they came to the island. happened. It wasn't just the radio that reawakened them, it was the locked away feelings buried deep below the surface of our two main power players throughout the story. Clarissa seems to be the only character that is unable to resist the ghost's possession, or else she's reached that moment of acceptance right as it possessed her. You'll note that unlike the other characters where there are moments where the characters say, "Snap out of it," we never catch any glimpses of Clarissa desperately crawling back to the surface in order to get control again, which means that the ghost overwhelmed her with her own feelings of guilt and she accepted her place as their puppet, or that she willingly allowed them to possess her in order to get some sort of revenge on Alex. Meanwhile, Alex has the option to accept that her brother is gone as well as her own feelings of guilt, or get ultimate revenge on Clarissa by dooming her body and mind to the depths of elsewhere by allowing her to be possessed by the ghost. Despite being drastically different characters, Clarissa and Alex go through very similar traumas, which results in near identical emotional states. It's just the way that they handle it is different, causing a variety of conflicts between them. By her actions, Alex ignited the sparks that led to a much-needed confrontation between herself and Clarissa, the results of this being entirely determined by the player. If she was saved, it ended the feud and gave them a chance to talk, becoming friends again. If she was killed, then all memory of Clarissa is erased from existence. In the end, it's up to you what path you make Alex take, and if you're willing to let grief overwhelm her like it did the ghost all those years ago.